These are the solutions for the practice test on the front side of the study guide for Test 1, Quarter 1, for both algebra classes. And so the first question is going to ask us to find the opposite of a number. Well, the opposite is always talking about sign. And so when I look at this number, I'm looking at its sign. Well, this is a negative 2/9. So the opposite of this would be positive 2/9. So you could put the plus sign there if you wanted to, or you could just write it as 2/9. Either way would show me that you understood what the opposite is. Looking at the next one, it's asking us to find the reciprocal of 1/5. And the reciprocal is when you multiply a number by its reciprocal, it equals 1. So basically on this one, we want to turn the fraction around. And so if we turn that fraction around, we've found the reciprocal. You see again, 1/5 times by its reciprocal, 5/1 equals 1. So the reciprocal is 5. If you wrote 5/1, that's fine as well. Either of those answers would end up being good answers. Here it's asking for the reciprocal again, so underline the reciprocal. This is what I'm looking for, so I got to turn that fraction around just like I said over here. And so if you don't see it as a fraction, write it as a fraction. Turn it around and it would be 1/3, but keep the sign the same. So it doesn't matter whether the negative sign is with the 1, or if it's in line with the fraction bar, like right there, or if it's with the 3. Either of these answers, any of these 3, would be good answers for this problem. Let's take a look at our next one. It says find the root, and the root is going to be what two numbers multiply to make 324. So since the number is even, if it's an even number, like this one's even because it ends in a 4, then try even numbers. Try even numbers. And so when I'm looking at it, I know it's less than 20 because 20 times 20 makes 400, and it's 324 is a little smaller. So I'm going to try the next even number. So I try 18 times 18, and when I go ahead and multiply those two numbers, I do get 324. So that means my answer is 18. Next one's asking for a different type of root. It's a fourth root. So we need four numbers that multiply to equal 81/625. So think of it as two separate problems to start with. Think of it as the fourth root of 81, and for this one, since it's an odd number, you're going to try odds. And then you think of it as the fourth root of 625. Again, another odd number. So again, you're going to want to try odd numbers. And so when we do this, we see that 3, 3, 3, and 3, those numbers multiply to make 81. So that means the top number is going to be 3. And you'll see how 5, 5, 5, and 5 multiply to make 625. And so that tells us that the denominator is 5. And so there's our answer, 3/5. Next one says to simplify this expression. Notice that it's a minus sign and then 4 squared. Now, the minus sign right next to the 4 without parentheses means the opposite. This means opposite of 4 squared. So what we have to do is think of it as like -1 times by 4 squared. So when we do this work, -1 times by 16 would be a -16. That is the answer for this problem. Now, if you got positive 16, then you're thinking of this, -4 in parentheses squared. See, this is different. These are not equal to each other. And so you see this one is -4 times -4, which equals 16, which is not the same as -16. So you see how when we have the minus sign on the outside, no parentheses, it means the opposite of 4 squared. Let's take a look at the last 3 problems. And here they are. We have, this one does have the parentheses around it. So since it has parentheses around it, now we're going to go ahead and take that -6 and multiply it out 4 times. And so we've got -6 times -6 times negative 6 times negative 6. So notice that the parentheses, these parts right here around that negative 6, tell us that the negative 6 is being brought to that fourth power. So I'd start with the two negative 6's, and you get 36 and 36. And then you just have some multiplication to do. 36 times by 36. So you multiply those two numbers, and let's see what we end up coming up with here. We end up with 1296. 1,296. The last two problems are going to be asking us about naming the properties. So when we name the property, what you're thinking about is either the commutative property, I'll abbreviate these things, the associative property, thinking about the distributive property. We could even have the inverse or identity properties. So these are the properties I'm thinking of as I'm looking at the problem. So what I'm trying to do on it, because it seems kind of complicated, is I'm looking to see what had to be done to this to make 40. Because the 3x squared minus 9, that's the same. So this is equal to this. These are the same. So nothing happened with these. But the 40 and the 5 and 8, well, 5 times 8 makes 40. So what they had to do is they had to move. They had to move the 8 next to the 5 in order to make 40. So we had to move the 8 next to the 5 to equal 40. And so that's what they did. So what is that moving property? Well, that's the commutative property. Commutative property. And this one is of multiplication, because that's what we're doing, 5 times 8. So commutative property of multiplication. We're getting our next one. We've got 3x squared minus 18 plus 14. And here we've got 3 times by x squared minus 6 plus 14. So this plus 14 is the same. So let's cross that off. That doesn't affect the problem. So this is what we need to zero in on right here. Well, what did they do to this 3x squared minus 18? What they did is they took out a 3. They divided both of them by 3, and then they got what was left over, x squared minus 6. Well, that is called the distributive property. In this case, they distributed the 3 over that x squared minus 6, or they took out the 3 from the 3x squared minus 18. So the distributive property is what I'm looking for. So that's an example of what you'll end up seeing on this week's test. Good luck.